We have the pleasure today of being joined by North Carolina head men's lacrosse coach, Coach Breschi. Thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
You are the coach of quite a successful team right now. The Tar Heels are 8-2, but back-to-back close losses to very good teams. What's the feeling right now down in Chapel Hill with your group?
Anytime you have a loss or two, and the strength of the ACC, the importance of getting back to work on a Monday and Tuesday, and just fixing the things you didn't do so well, and sticking to the things that you were successful at. So I think from our standpoint, it's getting back to work and really trying to improve in areas that we thought we maybe struggled with or weren't great at. And in these ACC games, you have to be really good at everything. So really paying attention to the details of special teams and how we do our rotations defensively and how we slide and so forth. And certainly offensively taking advantage of our, possessions.
Is that sort of the message that's been going on that you've been sort of giving the players this week, is to just keep focus on those details and continue to improve in those aspects?
I mean, it really is. When you think about it, we went over to Duke, we lost to them 12-11, game that really was in the balance either way. I don't think anybody scored. We scored late in the fourth quarter, but it was just more of a defensive struggle, and last week was an offensive battle. And we were also playing a team that we had beaten 4 weeks prior. So it's all the credit to them. I mean, you just try to focus on yourself and how you can get yourself better moving forward for Syracuse. Obviously, we in the ACC, everybody's in the top 10, and everybody has talent. And I really believe when you play in this league that it's the little things that make the difference in these games, and the majority of them have been very tight. So that's what we're trying to focus on, is not worrying about necessarily your competition. Obviously, we prepare for who we're going to see and what we're going to see, but at the end of the day, we got to work on ourselves and how we can be more efficient at both ends of the field and in special teams.
Coach, before we dive too deep here, we asked Coach Corrigan the same question. Is this the best you've ever seen the ACC in your time at Carolina?
I would say yes, top to bottom. Just from a talent standpoint, I think with, the extra year of eligibility, the graduate students, the transfers, I think it's across the board. There's just a lot of talent. It makes for great lacrosse. And I think that's what's great for the fans and certainly for the sport.
Coach, rewinding to last year, you guys are 7-0 when obviously the news comes down of no more season. Just sort of what were the emotions of that like? I mean, you guys were one of the top teams in the country at that point, and how you've sort of channeled that emotion into really getting after it this season.
Well, much like all the athletes and all the teams in our entire country shutting down for, roughly 5-6 months until athletics started popping back up here and there. It was difficult, from our team in particular. It was a difficult, challenge to keep the spirits of the young men up. There was so much uncertainty about the seniors, from a graduation standpoint to an extra year of eligibility. We were so fortunate to have Roy Williams, our basketball coach who just retired, donate $600,000 to all spring sports seniors last year, so they could come back for their 5th year. And quite frankly, we wouldn't have our first midfield if it wasn't for him, with Cook, Anderson, and Perry. So, you really have to bond together. Our athletic department did that the best we could. The student athletes did that. And to have some people with the means to step up, like Roy Williams did, to really support the student athletes, which he's done throughout his entire career here being a Tar Heel, is pretty special. So the uncertainty of the season ending and what's next, to these guys getting an opportunity to come back, and then the chaos of the fall with the spread of the virus throughout campus, and now going to all remote, and now to go back to kind of some in-person, some remote classes through the spring. It's been a challenge. It's been a challenge, I think, for everybody to try to handle it the best way they can. But I commend our student athletes for doing an unbelievable job and understanding the importance of, making the right decisions off the field to give us the chance to compete in the spring.
I was about to get into lacrosse, but you mentioned Roy Williams, and now you led me to it. So I got to ask, what was your relationship like with Coach? Were you interacting a lot, or on a professional basis, or just as friends?
Yeah, I mean, he's such a great mentor to really all the coaches here. We have a terrific bunch of coaches within the department. Anson Durance has won 22 national championships as soccer coach, and I think there's 9 coaches on staff who have won national championships, which is pretty impressive. And but he's just a wonderful man. I mean, you can't ask from a donation standpoint to help the student athletes. I'll give you a quick story. My family, it was actually 2017 when we were honored for winning the national championship. In 2016, at a football game, I was up in the press box with my family and so forth, and we ran into Roy Williams, and my daughter had a late night. My youngest daughter, who was 9 at the time, had a late night with Roy t-shirt on, and he said, "Hey, Emily," and I took a picture of him with Emily and Roy, and he said, "Emily, look, next year at late night with Roy, I want you to sit on the bench with me." And I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." And it just so happens they go out and win the national championship in 2017. So the following year, he's true to his word. He says, "Joe, I'm going to have your daughter Emily on the bench." They're getting the ring ceremony, the banner's going up, and she's on the bench with the team. I mean, that's the kind of guy he is, right? He's just a really good, down-to-earth person who, really gets athletics, gets student athletes, and is a team player within the realm of our athletic department, which is really cool.
Wow, awesome just to see that aspect. And I mean, to have 9 coaches, as you were saying, with a national championship under their belt is beyond impressive. To get into a little bit more lacrosse right now, we'll go sort of macro here between Syracuse and Carolina. 4 of the last 5 have been 1-goal games with 2 overtime games in that stretch. What is it? Is it just the ACC brings out the best in these teams when they come together? But what is it that makes these games so fun every time Cuse and UNC meet up?
Well, I tell you, first and foremost, I got incredible amount of respect for Coach Desko and his coaching staff and the team. I love the way they operate up there. Always been a huge fan. I played at Carolina when Roy was coaching back in the day, and it was always a slugfest. Unfortunately for me, I went in and out with Gary and Paul Gate, so they won 3 national championships while I was at Carolina. And I think I lost to them at least twice in the playoffs, but just an incredible amount of respect for their program and how their players play. And I love their style of play. And it's 2 really good teams. I'm so glad they're in the ACC because I tried to get the game back. We used to play them in the 90s and certainly in the 80s when I played, but in the 90s, and then things kind of fell apart a little bit, and they added Virginia over the years. But now that they're in the ACC, we get to play again, and it's just so fun. And honestly, there's a couple places that I would love for our guys to play. Homewood Field at Hopkins and the Carrier Dome against Syracuse. I mean, that is, to me, that's what lacrosse is all about. Although we have a beautiful new stadium here in Chapel Hill, I think it's really impressive to go up to the Dome and play. And now they're having fans in, which is great. And I just think it's 2 really good teams and so well coached up there and so much talent. So it's fun. The games that you've seen, the last 4 games in particular, have been back and forth. And I think we had a couple overtimes up there in the Carrier Dome a couple of years back as well. And it brings out the best in teams when you're battling in the ACC for sure.
Coach, you alluded to your first line of middies a bit before in Anderson, Cook, and Perry. How have they sort of evolved as a group over time? Really a unit that almost kind of mirrors what Syracuse brings to the table with Dordovic, Trimboli, and Curry. Do you see any sort of similarities there and just how they've evolved over time?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, it's Anderson, Cook, and Perry this is their 5th year together. And actually, they've been on the same line for 4 straight years. They started as sophomores on the first line / second line. So they know each other like a book, which is fantastic. You look at Anderson, who's married. He has a child on the way in the next couple of weeks here. So he's the veteran, mid 20s, and just kind of gets like real life stuff. Cook's the Canadian from up north and just extremely skilled and so forth. And Perry's got hardest shot on the team. So they complement each other extremely well with regards to what they can do on the field. And I think just having played together for, 5 years, but really 4 years on the same line has been impressive. And I certainly do think it's similar to the Curry line. Curry may have a little more speed than we have, but from a perspective of them being all 3 of them being threats, there's no question as talented as group as we've seen all year.
Well, I'm happy to see you shout out Tanner Cook's home country. Happens to be mine as well. And 277's Hill Academy alumni going on the field when they face off with Owen Hiltz as well. But we'll stick on UNC's attack for now. I mean, we weren't going to get out of this episode without mentioning Chris Gray, who some would argue is the best player in the country. He's been doing it for so long, but how is he different this year than years past? Is there something about Gray that has evolved, as Johnny just said?
I think from his perspective, first and foremost, he's a wonderful young man and, and extremely talented. And he's a guy that makes everyone, I know it's kind of cliche-ish, but he makes everyone around him better. And he kind of lets the game come to him. He doesn't force things. He kind of, if one game he's got, 2 goals, 5 assists, next game he's got, 4 goals, 1 assist. But he makes everybody around him so much better. And he's so humble, when you talk to him after a game or after a win, he's like, I'm a product of the guys around me. They got me open. I listened to the coaches. I was put in the right spots and so forth. So he's never giving himself the credit, but I can tell you this, he's arguably the best, player I've ever coached. And we've had a lot at Carolina over the years, and he's a really, really special player and a humble guy, and and just loves the game. He loves to play the game, and he's so creative. And I think to my days of playing with Gary and Paul Gate, coaching against the Pals and so forth, and just seeing how creative they were back in the day and making things happen and making plays that you're like, wow, how did he do that? And we see that a lot in practice. We're like, wow, how did he do that? And he, he'll pop that in the game. And then you're like, for us, it's like, we see it every day. So it's kind of neat to have a guy like that on your team, because it's really helped the young people, our young freshmen and sophomores watching him. And even, a guy like Nicky Solomon, whose brother was a former Syracuse star. But Nicky Solomon and Jacob Kelly and Brian Cameron and guys like that, to play with Chris, it really opens up their game a bit too.
Well, now I got to ask about Nicky Solomon. Obviously, Nate is a very familiar name to people around these parts. I know he's a junior now, so this is a bit of ancient history, but did you feel like you were battling Syracuse for Nicky's commitment when he was, coming into school?
I guess maybe. I'm not sure. We try not to talk too much about the other teams that we were going toe to toe with. I'm sure he was considering Syracuse because his brother was there and his parents are from up there as well. They live in Georgia, obviously, but maybe he's more of a homebody, so he wanted to stay a little bit closer to home. But Nate's a wonderful young man too. I love watching him play. I didn't love playing against him because he was talented, but Nick, he's kind of carved his own path, and it's been pretty cool to watch. So he's a heck of a player and heck of a shooter, and really creates opportunities for himself and his teammates as well.
Coach, you took away the family trees. Syracuse so prides itself on the family connections. You mentioned the Gates, you mentioned the Powells, the Simmons as well, just all those family connections. And now we've got to sort of take that and root for Carolina, I guess, in all games but one, in terms of following along with these family trees. To switch things over to the defensive side for you guys, one of the things that I think is almost a recurring question for us at this point is when you look at sort of Syracuse's depth in the midfield and up top, how do you sort of decide, who's getting the shorty in this situation?
It's tough. I think we've been battling that in the ACC all year, right? So we've had Duke, who has a ton of middies. You have Virginia, who's got a ton of middies as well. And now you face Syracuse, who's just loaded across the board. And again, I think you got to look at it a couple ways. It's, do we short stick that guy because you're going to slide to him, or do you pole him even if he's got the speed to pass you? You're going to slide anyway. So I think it's more being really sound in your slides, your rotations, because they're going to create slides, right? They're going to create double teams. They're going to create opportunities offensively. You don't want to create it for them, but they're athletic enough to put you in a situation where you have to slide and support the Dodger, right? So the important thing is, how are we playing off ball with Scanlon and Hiltz? Those two guys are extremely talented at catching, and their release is ridiculous. In particular, Hiltz does a great job getting rid of the ball. And then you got a guy who's shooting 50%, Reefus. He's exceptional. And his vision's great. I know he's got 20 goals and 10 assists and just doing everything right for their offense. And guys are working off him. So to answer your question, I think it's a balancing act. It's not one guy you have to stop. It's really the team defense has to play a terrific game to slow down a really talented offense.
One of the narratives surrounding Syracuse this season, not so much as of extremely recently, but if you go a couple weeks back, was just sort of their struggles at the face-off X. So when you look at this week's matchup, how important do you feel it's going to be for you guys to really dominate at the X come this weekend?
Well, I think there's two teams that like to run, right? So I think both teams like to get up and down the field, push transition, get opportunities offensively. So if you were able to steal a couple more possessions either way, whether it's them or us, to really put pressure on the defense, I think one of the things that we struggled with against UVA was just that at the end of the game was Petey was excellent at the face-off X against us in the fourth quarter in particular. And that was really the difference. I mean, it puts a lot of pressure on defense if you're trying to make a stop to get a possession. So I think from anyone's perspective, although some say the face-off is overrated, I say, you can't score if you don't have the ball. And two teams who like to put points on the board, it's going to be impactful either way, whoever has a good day at the X.
You guys run a fairly even two-man, face-off group. A lot of people have two face-off men, but Tucci and Tyre, who I am praying I pronounced his name right.
Good.
Nice. Those two, 152 and 148 face-off attempts for them respectively. What goes behind using them so evenly?
Well, both of them are extremely athletic, and that's something that this new face-off rule this year has really helped us. Not only do we have talented face-off guys in general, but now we have athletes who if we do lose it, we can scrap and fight for the ball. So first and foremost, athletically, they're terrific. I really feel Tyre has made that step up from his freshman year to now his sophomore year to make an impact. And he showed that in practice. And, during the early part of the year, he started using that athleticism, and both of them have it. When they win the draw, they can run. And they both of them have put points on the board. I think Tucci has 4 points, and Tyre right now, I believe, has 6. But it's just been fun to watch those guys operate. And, if we do get the opportunity to win some draws, those guys are athletic enough to not only win it and win those possessions, but also create offense for us. So, I think the balance is big, especially down the stretch. Wear and tear on their bodies with the face-off, and having 2 guys in the ACC and possibly beyond is going to be really important.
What is or is there a major difference in style between the two? And if so, or any difference in style, and if so, what is it?
I'm not sure if there's a complete difference because of the new rules, right? It's more quickness in your hands and getting it in and out as quickly as you can. There's counters we work on, a little bit of everything. But I think there's more similarities with regards to their athleticism and ability to get to the ball if they lose the clamp, and or if it is a loose ball in space. And that's what, athletically they can both get to the ball, which is, almost as important as the quickness of your hands. But they can both get in and out of there in a hurry. And that's what, to me, is most impressive.
Coach, is there a player on this team that you think doesn't get enough recognition, sort of flies under the radar, and now's your chance to sort of bring him into the limelight and give him that shout?
I think there's a couple guys that have kind of stood out a little bit. Cam Macree's a guy who doesn't get. Will Bowen's our best defender at that end, and Connor Marr's our best short stick D midi. But Cam Macree did a great job on Michael Sowers for Duke, and Colin Krieg in the cage is doing a sound job for a freshman in the ACC, and seeing a lot of shots that he's seen over the course of the last 2 months or so. Offensively, Connor McCarthy, transfer from Princeton, has just done a really sound job of kind of holding up the leadership piece of the second midfield. We've made some changes, and different guys have rotated in. He's been kind of the sound guy there. And, last game against UVA, we had 7 points from our second midfield, 6 points from our first midfield. Anytime you can get that kind of production from your second group, you're going to be pretty excited about it. So, Connor McCarthy, Cam Macree, I think, at both ends.
Coach, I wanted to ask you about Colin Krieg because, you hit the nail on the head. He comes in as a freshman. It's an ACC that we've heard all about as maybe as loaded as they come. So what have you seen out of him to sort of just step in and really fill that role? I mean, multiple games with double-digit saves. He's got a save percentage just around 52. So what makes him so dominant as a netminder?
Well, I think what's most impressive is he's got a phenomenal work ethic, and he earned the starting job as we kind of went through the fall. And obviously everybody was dealing with some of the COVID situations, and sometimes we'd have guys at practice, some guys not. And that happened early too when the guys returned from Christmas. But, I think the biggest thing Colin brings to the table is just like emotionally, he's so sound. He doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. He just makes the next play. And, quite frankly, I think he's got a strong head on his shoulders with regards to that. He doesn't get flustered. He just plays the game, and he loves to play. How many goalies on a day before you play a game takes 200 shots? And he's trying to get his teammates better, and he's trying to get himself better. So he just loves the game. He puts so much time and energy into it, and he's this. He sings in the cage. He's singing music, tunes that, whether it's over the loudspeaker or whatever, he's dancing and singing, and keeps him calm, keeps him even. And the guys, and at the end of the day, as a former defenseman, you want a goalie who, you just love to play in front of. And he's that kind of guy that our guys really enjoy playing in front of. Now, the biggest thing for us is we can't depend on him. You can't play loose in front of him. You gotta continue to play tight because he's going to make those low angle saves and so forth. And so that's the other piece is don't get too comfortable that you have a great one behind you.
It should be two really fun personalities in cage when these two teams play, with Porter down the other side and a little bit of the new young thing against one of the more grizzled vets of the ACC. A lot to dissect there in cage, and a lot with this game. As we wrap up this talk with you, Coach, I want to try and get a little, fill in the blanks, keys to the game thing here. If your team, UNC, is going to be successful against Syracuse, what's the main thing that needs to go well? And if you guys are unsuccessful, what's the main thing that's not going to go well?
That's a good question. Sometimes you go in thinking one thing and it's completely different than what you anticipate. Obviously, they're loaded offensively and have a lot of talent there, and really strong at the defensive end as well. Porter's one of the best goalies in the country as well. So we have to be really good at the special teams. And that what I mean by that is the riding, the clearing, the face-off and wing plays got to be excellent. We talked about possessions, how important that is. We got to be efficient offensively. And we really have to be sound at the defensive end, and really know our slides, know our slide packages, know our recoveries, and know what their strengths are. When all 6 of those guys are threats, it puts a lot of pressure on the defense. Fortunate for us, we see it in practice because all 6 of those guys on our offensive end are pretty talented as well. So it's going to be a little bit of everything, and it's whoever does the best at those little details that makes the biggest difference in the game.
Well, it should be a lot of fun. We can't wait to watch, and good luck with the game coming up on Saturday. Thank you so much for coming on, Coach. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Stay warm up there, gents.
We'll try our best.
Will do.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thanks. You too.